David, we're going to bring up Mitchell Weisman, who's the CEO of LifeStreet Media, sort of a fantastic company that has done some amazing work in the monetization space. And Mitchell, why don't you come on up and we'll get you rolling. Here he is. And Mitchell's going to fire up the crowd a little bit and talk a little bit about monetization. So, Mitchell Weisman from LifeStreet Media. Hello. 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 Hello, AppNation! Hello! Yeah. 10 good minutes. This is a lot of minutes when you're standing up here, especially when I want them to be 10 good minutes. Good minutes for you. So where to start? Where to begin? 10 good minutes. Like any problem, where we start is breaking it down into a smaller problem. We take big problems, we divide them into smaller problems. The problem of 10 good minutes begins with 1 good minute. In fact, one could argue it begins with 10 good seconds. Oppa Gangnam Style! Moving now. Next 10 pretty good seconds. So this is me. I'm Mitchell. That's my kid. That's my kid's fish. By way of background, so I'm the founder and CEO of LifeStreet Media. I've been in online advertising for over a decade. 7 years of venture capital and private equity. By way of background on LifeStreet Media, so we are the largest in-app advertising provider for Facebook apps, and more recently we've been serving apps into mobile apps. And if you are an app developer and you're looking to turn your ad space into money, well, we're your best friend. We've paid out over $125 million to various app developers for turning their ad space into money. And if you're an app developer on the flip side and you're looking for distribution for your apps, well, we're also a great friend of yours. So we've driven over 225 million app installs for a whole range of companies. So that's a little bit about LifeStreet Media, but today's discussion we're going to talk about 3 big things for the app economy, each of which requires getting very small. So thinking about things in a smaller way. And I guess before I go there, just a word about data and charts and analytics. We're all seeing a lot of data. We're talking about big data, analytics, and so forth. So we've all got a lot of data. I would recommend that you take your data and throw it on a chart. A lot of times you can actually discover things. There are insights to be found. I mean, by way of example, here's some data. It may not look very impressive, but this is when I have to sneeze. So most of the time I don't have to sneeze, but once in a while, we have to sneeze. And so I decided to take the data about when I have to sneeze and throw it on a chart. I don't see much insight here. There's not a really great way to mine this particular data. But sometimes you can go grab other data and put it together with some data, and you can find some insight. So for example, here's another chart that I put together. This is a have to pee chart. You'll notice it's a lot less spiky. Right, so, you know, you don't have to pee, and then you have to pee, and you have to pee. There's not a whole lot of insight here yet. But here's my point. Sometimes you can take the most basic data, and if you put it together and visualize it, right? So let's overlay these 2 studies on top of one another. And frankly, this is what we call data mining. And sometimes when we mine data, we can actually glean something, discover something. And I know the CIA was here. They're in the business of preventing disasters. Well, here's some data analysis that could suggest one way to avoid one particular sort of disaster. Having said all of that, I said I'm going to talk about 3 big things, and all these big things involve getting very, very small. The first thing is that averages lie. When you take an average of any data set, you're going to want to break it down because averages lie. You got to get small. The second big thing for the app economy, and it's getting bigger all the time, is real-time bidding. And what makes real-time bidding for advertising a big, big deal is precisely because it allows us to get small. Where we used to be bidding for big groups of ads, all on a single price, now we can be bidding for little tiny batches of ads or even a single impression with a single bid. Again, it's about getting big by getting small. And finally, we're going to talk about high-velocity testing and how it has come of age, how we are suddenly able, instead of making big, grand judgments about our products or about our choices, our marketing choices, we can test at high velocity in very granular ways. We can get small. And so first, we're going to talk about how averages lie. And I guess I'll share a story with you. So I'm on my way over to Moscone this morning, and I see this guy. This pretty nerdy-looking guy. And he's got his head in an oven. I'm like, dude, you've got your head in an oven. And I look over. He's got his feet in a bucket of ice. He's got his head in an oven and his feet in a bucket of ice. I said, dude, what's going on? You have your feet in an ice bucket. He takes his head out of the oven. He says, well, I'm a statistician. And he said, on average, I'm comfortable. The point is, averages lie. All right, so who cares? Well, the answer is, if you're running a business, you should care. You should care. For example, if you're going to go do customer acquisition, suppose you're going to go buy some advertising to go acquire customers or drive installs for your apps. Well, you better be thinking about your lifetime value. What is an average user worth to you in terms of revenue? But that's not really a good enough question because averages lie. So you have to get smaller. You have to divide the populations into smaller and smaller groups. For example, suppose you have user group 1, where the average lifetime user value is $1 of lifetime revenue. That's very different than user group 2, who have a completely different, more valuable average user value of $10 per user. Now suppose I were just averaging these together, user group 1 and 2, and all my user groups. And I'd say, okay, on average, the lifetime user value is $5.50. Well, that's great. The average is $5.50. Now, what am I going to go do with our precious company money as I try to buy advertising to drive installs? Well, if the average user value is $5.50, maybe I'm willing to bid $2 per user, or $3 per user, or maybe even $4 per user, but certainly not $5 or $6 per user, because the average user value is $5.50. We know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is I'm going to end up getting a whole lot of user group 1. If I'm bidding $4, the advertising community is going to force feed me high volumes of these users that are only worth $1, and I'm paying $3 or $4 for them. I'm losing money on every one of them. But how am I going to make money? Well, volume. No, I'm losing money on every single one. And on the flip side, here's user group 2, where I could have afforded to pay $5, $6, $7, and I actually could have gotten these valuable users. But on average, they're only worth $5.50. I'm only willing to bid $4. I'm not getting any of them. Averages lie. Divide the populations into smaller groups. Think small in order to accomplish big things. Real-time bidding. This is a big deal. This is a vision that started over a decade ago when some pioneers decided, hey, online advertising should trade the way shares of stock trade, like the New York Stock Exchange, like the NASDAQ. Right? And this vision has been a long time in coming. But it's finally starting to happen. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but first, 10 more good seconds. Okay. Real-time bidding. It is a really, really big deal. Over $2 billion in the US alone were spent this way. And the best part is, it's growing at 90% year over year. So Q3 of this year versus Q3 of last year is 88% higher. So this is growing a whole lot. So what? Well, here's what. Before real-time bidding, if you're a buyer of advertising, supposed to drive new users for your apps, you used to have to buy big. You used to have to buy a big group of impressions, and you had to price them with an average. We know that averages lie. But let me buy this big group of impressions, and I'm going to pay 65 cents cost per thousand, or CPM, for all of these impressions. Never mind the fact that these impressions are to radically different people, in many cases on different websites, different contacts, different locations in the page. How on earth is 65 cents the right bid for all of these impressions? And the answer might be on average it is, but we just saw with the Wookiees what can happen if you're bidding based on averages. So along comes real-time bidding. Instead of buying big, suddenly you can buy small. Suddenly you can realize that, aha, for this little group of impressions, or for this one impression, there's something actionable that I know, that anonymous user 12846 has bought my product before. And therefore I'm willing to bid $3.37 CPM for these impressions, whereas maybe there was another group of impressions on the same website. They look the same, but maybe I know that these people haven't bought anything, and maybe they're not at all the same. Maybe instead of $3.37, maybe they're only worth 1/10 of that, or 5% of that. Maybe they're only worth 16 cents. With real-time bidding, I can bid the right price for the right impressions and be economical about things. Again, big opportunity that is harvested by thinking small. Finally, I will say that high-velocity testing has come of age. So we as marketers and as product people have known since time immemorial that testing is a good idea. Right? Try things, see what works better. But we've also known that historically, testing has been a static, manual, slow, one-at-a-time exercise. Right? I'm going to do one test right now. I'm going to take 5% of my traffic or my audience, and I'm conducting a test. And once that test is done, then I can go do another test. Very, very slow. And as a result, there are so many things that we would want to test that we don't end up testing because it's not worth trying. There's not enough time, there's not enough traffic, there's not enough money. Well, in 2012, 2013, with the technologies that are available from LifeStreet, from other companies, there's some fantastic technology that allows us to fundamentally change this paradigm, where testing is no longer episodic. It's not an event, a test, but rather it's perpetual. It's a way of life. Instead of testing on a little test panel of 5% of your traffic, well, we at LifeStreet are testing on 500% of our traffic. And I literally mean that. So for example, using proper technology, a single impression can, and often does, participate in multiple tests at the very same time. So that suddenly you can ask these small questions that seem small, but that have big results. Should the button on the ad or on the product say, click here, or click, or learn more, or learn? Or next? Seems like a small question. Well, guess what? There's a right answer to that question. There's a right answer to that question. And these tests are not necessarily just about what things look like. There are all kinds of tests that you would want to go do. And with the right technology, it's now possible. I'll just give you one example on this final point. This is a recent advertiser case study where the advertiser said, hello, LifeStreet. Here are some ads. We'd like to buy some advertising. We took those ads, we started doing high-velocity testing in the way that many companies can now. And over the course of 23 rounds of testing, over the course of 45 days of calendar elapsed time, we were able to produce over 1,000% yield lift. Meaning that if a group of ads, the same group of ads, was producing $1 on day 1, they could produce $10 on day 10 by conducting high velocity testing. This stuff is possible in 2013. So again, in closing, we've talked about 3 big things that require going small. 1, averages lie. Please remember this. Don't average. Break the users up, break the impressions up, break the product up, and into smaller and smaller groups. 2nd, please consider real-time bidding. This is a big, big deal. $2 billion in the US alone, growing at 90% per year. It is the wave of the future, and the reason it's so big is because it allows you to go small and look at each individual economics of each individual impression. And finally, if you're not testing, you are losing, and if you're not testing at high velocity, you're losing. So consider high velocity testing a requirement, not a luxury. The common thread in all of this is granularity and getting small. Sometimes you have to break things down to release their full potential. And in closing, I guess I'll share with you 10 last quick seconds.
It's like a big peach wine with some that's what ring, as a bell.
Actually, I apologize. That was the wrong. This is the right last 10 seconds.
Your voice and try and smile.